recognize successes, but also to reinforce our commitments. Education is a pathway to economic empowerment, to economic development, I must say. But it is also a pathway to understanding, tolerance, and unity. In many ways, our commitment to foundational learning is also a commitment to peace, stability, security, and human dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, we reaffirm that we will continue to work with all partners to advocate for increased investment in education, with foundation and learning at the heart of our developmental agenda. Together, under the Continental Blueprint Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, we will seize this moment to scale our success and invest in our children's future for generations to come. We thank you for your kind attention.
What if the key to the entire global economy, the phones we hold, the cars we drive, the satellites above our heads, all depended on one region of Africa, a region rich in the rarest metals on Earth, a region that the world once ignored but can no longer live without? In the heart of Africa, deep beneath the red soil of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the rolling copper hills of Zambia, lies a treasure the world's most powerful nations are desperate to control: cobalt and copper. Together, these two countries hold more than 70% of the world's cobalt supply, the metal that powers electric cars, smartphones, laptops, and nearly every battery that defines the modern age. Every time someone in Silicon Valley launches a new gadget, every time an electric car rolls off an assembly line in California or Berlin, somewhere in Africa, cobalt has moved. For decades, the story of Africa's minerals was one of exploitation: raw materials shipped out, profits shipped away. But now, that story is changing. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia have begun rewriting the rules of global trade. No longer content with selling raw ores for pennies on the dollar, they're demanding something bigger: local processing, regional ownership, and continental control. It's the beginning of what economists are calling the African Resource Rebellion, and its shockwaves are being felt from Wall Street to Washington, from Paris to Beijing. Because if Africa keeps its cobalt, or simply refines it before selling, the consequences could be enormous. Tech giants could lose access to vital supply chains. Battery factories could stall, and the West's clean energy ambitions could slow down overnight. To understand how powerful this moment truly is, we need to go back to where it all began. The Congo Basin, home to some of the planet's richest mineral deposits, holds an estimated 3.5 million metric tons of cobalt, worth over $20 trillion at today's projected long-term market value. Zambia, its neighbor, contains some of the world's purest copper, a resource now valued at nearly $15 trillion in total potential reserves. Together, that's a $35 trillion mineral empire, sitting on land that was once dismissed as underdeveloped, now commanding global attention. From the early 1900s, colonial powers extracted Congo's riches to fuel Europe's industrial rise. Copper from Zambia built cities. Cobalt from Congo powered fighter jets. Yet both nations remained poor, exploited, and dependent. Today, a new generation of African leaders is asking, why can't Africa build the batteries, the chips, and the tech it supplies the world with? The question isn't just economic. It's revolutionary. In 2023, Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo signed an unprecedented strategic partnership to develop Africa's first regional electric battery value chain. Supported by the African Export-Import Bank and international partners, the plan aims to build refineries, cathode plants, and assembly lines right here in Africa, transforming raw minerals into finished batteries. If successful, it would mark the first time Africa controls the end-to-end production of a technology crucial to the world economy. And that is what terrifies the West. Because the more Africa processes its own resources, the less dependent it becomes, and the more vulnerable the Western supply chain grows. Every major electric vehicle on the market, from Tesla to Ford, Volkswagen to BYD, depends on cobalt for its batteries. Even smartphones, laptops, and drones use it. But nearly 3/4 of that cobalt comes from the Congo, with most of it refined in China, not the United States. That's why American and European companies are scrambling for direct partnerships in Africa before the door closes. If those negotiations fail, And if Africa decides to prioritize its local industries first, the ripple effects would be immediate. Battery prices would spike, tech production could slow, and the West's green energy transition could stumble. It's not a threat. It's leverage, pure economic leverage. And it's shifting global power in real time. This is the dawn of a new economic era. An era where Africa is not the supplier, but the strategic powerhouse the world cannot ignore. For decades, the Democratic Republic of Congo was treated as the world's raw material warehouse, a place to dig, ship, and forget. But now, every chip that powers Silicon Valley's dreams runs through this one African nation. Cobalt has become the new oil, and Congo is sitting on the tap. It began quietly. A handful of global analysts noticed that as electric vehicle sales exploded, so did demand for cobalt, rising more than 600% in a single decade. By 2025, analysts estimate the global cobalt market could exceed $100 billion annually. And nearly all of it still comes from one place: Africa. The tech world depends on it. Without cobalt, there is no Tesla battery, no iPhone power cell, no satellite communication backup. This single element sits at the heart of every device that defines the modern age. And the West is realizing, perhaps too late, that it doesn't control it. That's why Washington, Brussels, and even Tokyo are scrambling to diversify supply. But diversification sounds easy on paper and impossible in practice. You can't manufacture new cobalt deposits. They're geological gifts, and Africa owns them. In Lusaka and Kinshasa, leaders have begun to speak a new economic language, one of sovereignty, processing, and industrial pride. They no longer ask for aid. They negotiate from strength. Instead of exporting raw ore, they propose joint venture plants, regional battery corridors, and African-owned smelting hubs. Each deal signals the same message: we will no longer dig and deliver for others to profit. Meanwhile, Western tech corporations face an uncomfortable truth. Their supply chains, the invisible networks that keep their factories alive, are suddenly political. If Zambia and the DRC slow exports or impose beneficiation rules, production lines from Texas to Turin could grind to a halt. It's not aggression, it's assertion. Africa has learned that control over minerals means control over destiny. Across the continent, young entrepreneurs see opportunity. Startups are designing battery prototypes made entirely with African components. Universities are launching programs in metallurgy and energy storage. The dream is simple but profound: to build the first made-in-Africa battery for the world. And while some in the West call this ambition unrealistic, history is shifting beneath their feet. The same skepticism greeted China in the 1980s, when it began insisting on local manufacturing. For decades later, China became the workshop of the world. Now, Africa is following the same script, but with the advantage of modern technology and a unified sense of purpose. Observers in global markets already feel the tremor. Cobalt futures have surged. Hedge funds are betting on tighter African export controls. Meanwhile, policymakers in Washington whisper the same question: what happens if Africa decides to keep its cobalt? That question keeps CEOs awake at night. Because without cobalt, the U.S. tech industry would face shortages that money alone can't solve. Factories can be relocated, but mineral deposits cannot. It's not just about batteries anymore. It's about balance of power. This is why global attention is shifting from oil fields to mineral belts. Where once the Middle East decided the rhythm of global energy, the Copper Belt of Africa may soon decide the rhythm of global technology. Every mine, every refinery, every local policy now carries the weight of global consequence. And at the center of this new equation stands an emerging alliance between Congo and Zambia, a partnership redefining what it means for Africa to control its future. The West can no longer dictate the price of progress. Africa now holds the minerals that electrify the planet. And with each new agreement signed on African soil, the balance tilts further toward a new global order. The world has entered the age of the Cobalt Empire, and Africa is wearing the crown. The age of dependency is fading. From the Sahel to the Copper Belt, a new spirit is rising. A determination to define Africa not by what it lacks, but by what it owns. And what it owns is the foundation of the 21st century economy: cobalt, copper, lithium, gold, rare earths, the resources that fuel clean energy, digital networks, and artificial intelligence all begin beneath African soil. In Lusaka, Zambia's government has set its sights on becoming Africa's electric battery capital. Plans for massive industrial zones, energy corridors, and university partnerships are underway. And in Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo is asserting new licensing laws, ensuring that every ton of cobalt leaving its borders carries the mark of national benefit. These moves are not isolated. From Namibia's green hydrogen initiative to Tanzania's lithium partnerships and Nigeria's new refinery projects, the message is clear. Africa will no longer export poverty, it will export power. The economic shift is undeniable. Africa's GDP is projected to exceed $4 trillion within the next few years, driven not by aid but by resource management, industrialization, and intra-African trade. The African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest free trade agreement since the creation of the WTO, is knitting the continent's 1.4 billion people into a single market, worth more than $3 trillion in combined purchasing power. And for the first time in history, Africa is negotiating not from weakness, but from strategic strength. Meanwhile, Western economies are struggling to adapt. Inflation in energy and technology sectors has exposed how fragile their supply chains really are. As African nations tighten control over their resources, Western leaders find themselves in an unfamiliar position, dependent. It's not an act of retaliation. It's the natural correction of history. For centuries, the world extracted Africa's wealth and left its people in debt. Now, the equation is reversing. Foreign investors are returning to Africa, not as benefactors, but as partners. China and India have already built deep roots through infrastructure investments and technology exchange. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are funding agribusiness and renewable projects. Even Europe, once dominant, is now courting African alliances with urgency. And in Washington, the conversation has changed. Officials no longer ask if Africa matters. They ask how soon Africa will dominate the next economic cycle. Because the truth is simple: you cannot build the future without Africa. Every electric car that drives down an American highway, every smartphone that connects 1 billion users, every solar grid that powers the digital world, all begin with resources found in Africa. This is not coincidence. It is destiny unfolding. A century ago, colonial empires carved up Africa to control its riches. Today, a united and ambitious Africa is carving out a new identity, one defined by strength, innovation, and ownership. The partnership between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia is more than an economic alliance. It's a declaration: Africa will lead its own revolution. If these two nations succeed in controlling the full value chain, from mining to refining to manufacturing, it could trigger a continental transformation worth trillions. And that transformation will reshape the world. In boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Wall Street, quiet panic has begun. Because the next industrial age, the era of green energy, electric mobility, and artificial intelligence, will run on minerals controlled by Africa. The same continent once dismissed as a supplier of raw goods is now the heart of global progress. Its leaders are no longer waiting for permission. They are rewriting the future, one policy, one partnership, one refinery at a time. And as the sun sets over the copper hills of Zambia and rises over the cobalt mines of Congo, the message echoes across the world. Africa is no longer the resource of others. Africa is the resource of itself. The West built its empires on African minerals. Now Africa is building its future on its own terms. A new world is taking shape, one where power is measured not by who controls Africa, but by who Africa chooses to share its power with.
Welcome to African Spotlight 24, your premier source for news and current affairs from across the continent. We're glad you're here. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe, like, and turn on notification to stay up to date with the latest news and analysis. Your support helps us reach more people. Disclaimer: the content of this video is based on credible, publicly available information and is intended for educational, analytical, and informational purposes only. African Spotlight 24 does not promote hate, violence, misinformation, or political unrest. Our goal is to deliver thoughtful insights, highlight local voices, and encourage informed conversations throughout Africa.